members of the Security Council, I must say, enough is enough. The time has come to exhaust all of our diplomatic means before it's too late. War is never something the United States wants.
The UN Security Council held an emergency meeting Monday to discuss next steps for the international community's response to North Korea's escalating nuclear activities.
And his nuclear threats show that he is begging for war.
Ambassador Haley delivered a stern warning to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
War is never something the United States wants. We don't want it now. But our country's patience is not unlimited. Only the strongest sanctions will enable us to resolve this problem through diplomacy.
Washington warned Sunday of a massive military response if North Korea threatens the United States, its Pacific Island territory of Guam, or America's allies. The United States is also preparing additional unilateral sanctions to impose on North Korea. Ambassador Haley told council members that more than 2 decades of diplomatic efforts and international sanctions have failed to change the regime's calculus.
Despite our efforts over the past 24 years, the North Korean nuclear program is more advanced and more dangerous than ever. They now fire missiles over Japanese airspace. They now have ICBM capabilities. They now claim to have tested a hydrogen bomb. And just this morning, there are reports that the regime is preparing for yet another ICBM launch.
She said the United States would circulate a new draft sanctions resolution to council members and hopes to quickly put it to a vote next Monday. The council just adopted its toughest measures yet on the regime 1 month ago. Both the South Korean and Japanese envoys, as well as several council members, echoed the U.S. call for more robust international sanctions. Chinese envoy Liu Zheyi condemned North Korea's nuclear test and insisted the crisis must be solved through dialogue. He's heard here through an interpreter.
The situation on the peninsula is deteriorating constantly as we speak, falling into a vicious circle. The peninsula issue must be resolved peacefully. China will never allow chaos and war on the peninsula.
Russia's envoy urged parties to maintain a cool head and refrain from any action that could further escalate tensions.
To the members of the Security Council, I must say, enough is enough. We have taken an incremental approach, and despite the best of intentions, it has not worked. Members of this council will no doubt urge negotiations and a return to talks. But as I've just outlined, we have engaged in numerous direct and multilateral talks with the North Korean regime, and time after time, they have not worked. The time for half measures in the Security Council is over. The time has come to exhaust all of our diplomatic means before it's too late. We must now adopt the strongest possible measures. Kim Jong-un's action cannot be seen as defensive. He wants to be acknowledged as a nuclear power. But being a nuclear power is not about using those terrible weapons to threaten others. Nuclear powers understand their responsibilities. Kim Jong-un shows no such understanding. His abusive use of missiles and his nuclear threats show that he is begging for war. War is never something the United States wants. We don't want it now. But our country's patience is not unlimited. We will defend our allies and our territory. The idea that some have suggested a so-called freeze for freeze is insulting. When a rogue regime has a nuclear weapon and an ICBM pointed at you, you do not take steps to lower your guard. No one would do that. We certainly won't. The time has come to exhaust all diplomatic means to end this crisis. And that means quickly enacting the strongest possible measures here in the UN Security Council. Only the strongest sanctions will enable us to resolve this problem through diplomacy. We have kicked the can down the road long enough. There is no more road left. This crisis goes well beyond the UN. The United States will look at every country that does business with North Korea as a country, and the The United States will look at every country that does business with North Korea as a country that is giving aid to their reckless and dangerous nuclear intentions. And what we do on North Korea will have a real impact on how other outlaw nations who seek nuclear weapons choose to conduct themselves in the future. The stakes could not be higher. The urgency is now. 24 years of half measures and failed talks is enough.
North Korea claimed its sixth nuclear detonation was a hydrogen bomb capable of sitting atop an intercontinental ballistic missile. The detonation registered with international seismic agencies as a 6.3 magnitude event, up to 10 times more powerful than the North's previous blast. Sunday's blast was equivalent to about 100 kilotons of TNT and likely was a thermonuclear device.
Previously, North Korea's weapons have been fission weapons, which means that uranium or plutonium is split to generate energy. A thermonuclear weapon includes a simple fission weapon, but also different kinds of hydrogen are joined together, releasing huge amounts of energy in the process. We don't categorically know for certain it was a thermonuclear weapon, but I think the evidence suggests it very likely was.
What does this mean?
It means that North Korea's nuclear program is advancing, and in particular, this technology will give North Korea the capability to fit very high-yield warheads onto its nuclear weapons. Again, we don't know for certain that the device they tested was small enough to fit onto a ballistic missile, but if it's not, then I'm sure they will get there sooner rather than later. It's very bad news.
Given the pace of testing, James Acton is not surprised North Korea's rapid advancement in missile and nuclear capability, but Harry Kazianis of the Center for National Interest maintains the Kim Jong-un regime wants a nuclear deterrent, not an offensive system.
There's a lot of talk here in Washington and other places that Kim Jong-un is crazy, that he's a crackpot. I actually think he's very sane, at least in one respect. He wants nuclear weapons that can be placed on missiles that can threaten the United States if that he felt the U.S. was going to invade or launch an attack on him first. I do not believe that the North Koreans would ever launch a unilateral nuclear strike or even potentially a missile strike on U.S. bases or U.S. territory, because I think they know, as Secretary Mattis pointed out, they would be met with overwhelming responses. Now, if the North Koreans launched a nuclear attack, again, I don't think they would do that. They know it would be the end of their country. It would be the end of the Kim regime in North Korea as it stands today.
The South Koreans Monday conducted a live-fire missile drill with North Korea's nuclear test site as the virtual target.
Today, South Korea responded to yesterday's test with live-fire exercises of their own, with both ground and air-launched missiles. The drills by the South simulated the targeting of the nuclear site where North Korea carried out that bomb test deep inside a mountain. The U.S. have also responded, with Secretary Mattis issuing a threat of his own.
Any threat to the United States or its territories, including Guam, or our allies, will be met with a massive military response, a response both effective and overwhelming. Kim Jong-un should take heed of the United Nations Security Council's unified voice. All members unanimously agreed on the threat North Korea poses, and they remain unanimous in their commitment to the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Because we are not looking to the total annihilation of a country, namely North Korea. But as I said, we have many options to do so.
James Kim of the Seoul-based Asan Institute for Policy Studies says the latest nuclear test has heightened concern in South Korea.
There's certainly a lot of concern here. The government announced yesterday afternoon that there will be a really important announcement. It interrupted a lot of people's Sunday afternoon activities. The media coverage around the clock has been about the last test. And there's quite a bit of anxiety here about what the next steps would be.
South Koreans lived for decades with the threat of an attack by the North. They see the news about missile launches and more recently nuclear tests. They are civilian drills in case of an emergency, and people don't usually worry that much. But according to our EG1, the latest provocation is drawing a different response.
Having endured numerous provocations from North Korea since the country was divided over 6 decades ago, the South Korean public had previously been relatively calm and seemingly numb to Pyongyang's nuclear and missile threats. But this time, there were more than just indifferent responses from regular South Koreans.
I'm quite concerned. I saw Pyongyang's missiles being fired and tested on TV, and I don't want to have to suffer from wars anymore.
North Korea is going further and is now saying it has missiles that can reach not just Seoul but the US as well. And with the tension between Washington and Pyongyang aggravating, I think this is a grave situation.
I think the sixth nuclear test means the weapon has already been fully developed. It's already come too far.
I'm actually quite numb to the situation, but the South Korean government's response was different this time. The president ordered the most powerful punishment, so I think the situation is a little different this time around.
But despite North Korea's growing nuclear weapons capability and the heightened tensions on the Korean peninsula, many were still not too concerned.
I personally think the sixth nuclear test means it's nearing the end, but people around me seem to be really relaxed and indifferent to this. I think they've grown insensitive to Pyongyang's threats.
The North has always threatened us, but no major attacks have been actually made, so I'm not that worried.
There's nothing we can do. Being worried won't do us any good, so we're just carrying on with our lives.
The latest test didn't really get to me. In order for Kim Jong-un to continue his rule, he won't be able to easily start a war because he knows everything will end if he does that.
While reactions to the test differed, the general public seemed to agree that Seoul should come up with stronger measures against Pyongyang, mainly by strengthening its own military capability.
We must come up with a card that can go head-to-head with Pyongyang's missiles, even if it means developing our own nuclear weapons. Only by having such an option can we stop the war.
Peaceful negotiations can only happen when both sides have equal power. We must grow our own defensive capability and lessen our dependency on the U.S.
Many also said that the time for conversations with the North is now over, and that Seoul and the international community must further isolate the rogue nation diplomatically and economically. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.